Hey everybody, I'm Tanakis McLean, and this is the inaugural, and that means very first, episode of Political Hyjinx. In these wacky days of uncertainty, it seems like there's only one thing on everybody's mind: coronavirus. As it should be. But that doesn't mean that's the only thing going on right now. Far from it. In fact, there's a group of people who are trying to exploit the distraction of COVID-19. And I'm looking at you, Republican Party of Wisconsin. You see, the Democratic governor of Wisconsin is moving to postpone this week's elections until June because he understands that there are a few things harder to navigate around than, say, contracting a lethal disease. But the Republicans ain't having it. They understand that if you make voting easier, Democrats win. Don't believe me? Listen to this.
I will tell you this, if you look at before and after, the things they had in there were crazy. They had things, levels of voting that if you ever agreed to it, you'd never have a Republican elected in this country again. They had things in there about, election days and what you do and all sorts of clawbacks. And they had things that were just totally crazy.
That was Donald Trump spilling the beans on a secret that the Republican leadership probably didn't want you to know about. So when the Republican majority Supreme Court overruled the governor and ordered this week's elections to proceed as scheduled, they put the Democrats of that state in a tricky spot. Suddenly they had to decide between their right to vote and their personal safety. At the time of this filming, we didn't know what the results of that gambit were, so we'll find this out together. And there actually has been an update since we shot that on Monday. But first, some context. Through the magic of gerrymandering, the GOP has solidified power regardless of actually being the minority. The last chance the Democrats have of changing that is with the Supreme Court seat that's up for grabs in this election. If they win, they're one seat away from decreeing a government that actually represents the population. If they lose, power is out of Democratic hands until 2030. And apparently, the GOP in Wisconsin are okay with potentially infecting their constituents in order to retain it. Now, the Republicans of Wisconsin aren't the only people exploiting this COVID cover. In Washington, D.C., there are two men thanking their lucky stars for this outbreak. The first, of course, is Donald Trump. Because of the outbreak, the Supreme Court had to postpone its oral arguments into whether the president had to reveal his tax returns. And early on, congressional Democrats realized that Donald gets by with little help from his friends. So the Supreme Court was going to decide whether or not his associates could be compelled to testify if subpoenaed by the legislative branch, or at least they would have if it weren't for this outbreak. And the other fortunate SOB would be none other than our Attorney General, William Barr. Last month, he was ordered to submit an unredacted Mueller report to a federal judge to see if all of Trump's pet bulldog's edits were on the up and up. Now, while the report was turned over, it can't be read for a while yet. Why? Because of the coronavirus. And speaking of the corrupt one, last month, our esteemed Attorney General was to go before the House Judiciary Committee and explain his rather peculiar behavior. Like, for instance, why did the Justice Department decide to not investigate the whistleblower's claims when those claims were actually severe enough to get a president impeached? And whatever happened to the investigation of Rudy Giuliani? And finally, please explain, under oath, just how the change to Roger Stone's sentencing came about exactly. So you see, this whole pandemic we're all living under, for some Republicans turned out to be a very lucky break indeed. We did it! The first episode is in the can. Thanks everybody so much for all your support, and we love the feedback, so please keep it coming by leaving us a comment below. And if you like it, if you like what I'm cooking with this thing, be sure to like it. And we would love it if you would consider supporting us by subscribing. And if you want to see just how impactful all of your feedback was to what we're doing today, be sure to check out our test episode right there. Thanks everybody, and remember, we are in this together.